I'm going to review a little bit and look in more detail about some things with our quadrilaterals. This is called a parade of four-sided polygons. So anything that's got four sides is a quadrilateral. So that stuff we've already talked about. So quadrilaterals. There are many different types of quadrilaterals. We can identify quadrilaterals using their sides and angles. So the sides like the flat, straight line, and angles is where those two sides meet and make a point type of where they just touch each other. That's an angle. Okay. And we've already talked about that, so that's not new. Now let's review. All polygons are made up of line segments and angles. The line segments that create quadrilaterals will be parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting. Now, this is the new part. This is where you need to pay very close attention because I talked with the other third grade teachers, and this is what's some very important stuff that's on the test a lot. Parallel lines. The opposite sides of this quadrilateral are parallel. Parallel means if they kept going and going either direction, they would never cross over each other. Think of a train track. Those train rails would never cross over each other because just what think about what would happen to a train if the tracks started to cross over. It would crash. So they have to stay the same distance between each other so that train can keep on going. So when you think of parallel lines, you're thinking of if those sides kept going, see how those arrows are going either way? They would never cross over. They'd be that same distance. So if I measured 5 inches here and I kept on going up to the top and I measured it again, it should be 5 inches up there as well. Also, the road, you've got on the road, you've got white lines on either side of the road. They're the same distance apart from each other because if they got closer and closer and eventually touched, that wouldn't be safe for cars to drive down the road. So parallel lines are lines that would never cross over. So opposite sides are parallel. And like this top one, if I did lines going across the top and the bottom, they would be parallel because they would never cross. And so it's the opposite side, sides that are opposite from each other. Then the adjacent, that means the ones that are side by side. The adjacent sides of this quadrilateral are perpendicular. Perpendicular means they make what's called a right angle. Think of a piece of paper. If I had a piece of paper and I stuck it up in the corner right there of that, it makes a corner. So perpendicular makes a right angle, like the corner of a piece of regular paper. Now, the adjacent sides, or the sides that touch each other, of this quadrilateral are intersecting. They cross over each other. This one is an intersecting one, but it's a special one called a perpendicular because it's like a corner of a piece of paper. Any of them where they cross over and they don't have that special corner, they're still just adjacent sides that are intersecting. Like when you're on a road and you got to stop at the intersection. The intersection is where two roads meet. So if you think of an intersection of where two roads meet, this is like two roads, two sides meeting. Okay. So these are very important to know. Parallel lines, perpendicular lines, and intersecting sides or lines. Now let's review. The angles that make up polygons will be right angles, acute angles, or obtuse angles. Now we need to know those three things too. We need to know what right angles are, acute angles, or obtuse. So let's look at this first one. The angle that makes up this vertex, remember vertex is another way to say angle, of this quadrilateral is acute. Acute means like if you put a piece of paper right there and put the bottom right here and the other side of the paper goes up and down like this. It's shorter or goes to the inside. It's like a little cute angle. You think of a right angle like this one right here. This is like a piece of, like a little piece of orange paper. It's stuck in there and it looks like this. So the corner of a paper is a right angle. And now if you look at this, if I put it on top of here, you would see that this angle is smaller than the right angle. It's little cute, acute. It's a cute angle. I always think of little. Oh, it's such a little acute angle. That's how I look at that one. So we have an acute angle, which is smaller than a right angle, a right angle that looks like it's the corner of a piece of paper. And then we have this one. The angle that makes up the vertex of this quadrilateral is obtuse. Obtuse means it's wider and bigger than a right angle. I go obtuse. You say it with a deep voice, you think of something that is a deep voice is bigger. Something that's bigger has a deeper voice. So obtuse. So you can do this with a little, a cute, like a baby voice. And then your regular voice, right angles, like a piece of paper. And then a bigger, wider angle, bigger than a right angle, big, obtuse angle. See how it's wider than this one? And I'll get the shapes out in just a minute and show you how they are compared to the corner of a piece of paper. Okay. Now, let's look at squares. Now, a square is a quadrilateral that has 4 equal sides and 4 right angles. This one, if I measured it to be 2 inches, the rest of them will be 2 inches. And if you got a piece of paper and stuck it in the corner of all these, it would just line up with the corner of the paper. So it's right angles, every one of them. This square has 4 right angles and all 4 sides are congruent, the same length. You'll need to know what that word means. Congruent just means same length. How many pairs or sets of parallel sides do you see? So let's look at this one. The right and the left side. If I kept on going, would those sides ever cross? Can somebody tell me, would they ever cross? Just turn on your speaker long enough to tell me, would those ever cross over?
No.
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 They wouldn't. So those are parallel. So there's one set of parallel lines. Let's look at the top and the bottom. If the lines kept on going forever and ever, would they ever cross the top and bottom?
No.
No, they wouldn't either. So the right and left is one set, top and bottom is 2 sets. So we have 2 pairs or 2 sets of parallel lines. All right. Now let's look at rectangles. A rectangle is a quadrilateral that has 2 pairs of parallel sides that are equal and 4 right angles. So let's look at the angles. We could put a piece of paper in each of these and it line up right along the edge of the paper. Now, the difference between a rectangle and a square is this side, the top and the bottom's longer, and the right and the left shorter, but they're still parallel. The top and the bottom are still parallel. They'd never cross. The right and the left are parallel. They would never cross. Now, this rectangle has 4 right angles and 2 pairs of parallel sides that are congruent. Congruent means this is, if this one's 10, this one has to be 10. This one's 3, this one has to be 3 inches or whatever you're measuring. Now, if all 4 sides were equal, would this shape still be a triangle? So let's say I could morph or change this to go slide it and make all sides the same length. Would this still be a rectangle? Somebody answer that, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, it still
Yeah.
would be. It's a special kind of rectangle, but it still has 4 right angles and it still has 2 parallel sides that are congruent. But it's special that all 4 sides are equal. Like if this was 2 inches, this would be 2, this is 2, and this one would be 2. What would be the name of this special rectangle if I made all sides the same length?
A square.
It'd be a square. So you need to know that a square is also a rectangle. It's just a special kind of rectangle. Yeah, it gets kind of confusing, don't we? We're getting into the real deep ideas of things. So always remember a square is also considered to be a rectangle. It's just a special rectangle. Rhombuses. A rhombus is a quadrilateral that has 4 equal sides and 2 pairs of parallel sides. So this side and this side, if they kept on going, they would never cross. This top side here and this bottom side here, if they kept on going, they would never cross. So they are parallel. And if I measured this one to be 2 inches, the rest of them would be 2 inches. It's kind of like a square. I call it like a squished square because it follows all the rules of a square with all sides being the same length. The only thing about it different is the angles. This rhombus has 4 congruent sides and 2 pairs of parallel sides. Now, can a square be a rhombus? Let's think about that. For it to be a rhombus, it has to have 4 congruent sides that mean all sides have to be the same length. So does a square match that rule for a rhombus? Are all sides on a square the same length?
Yes.
Yes, so it follows that rule. Does it have 2 pairs of parallel sides?
Yes.
So here's another crazy thing. A square is a special kind of rhombus. Square is like a special shape that can be under all kinds of different things. So a square can be a square can be a rectangle, and a square can be also be a rhombus because it follows those rules of what a rhombus is. Well, we're getting really deep in this, aren't we? Let's see what else we have here. Trapezoids. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral that has 1 pair of parallel sides. And on this one, it's like the top and the bottom. If I kept going, they would never cross. Well, what about this side? If I kept going with this one and I kept going with this one, would they cross? Kind of watch this as I go up. Like if that line kept going like that and that line kept going like that, would they cross over?
Yes.
Yeah. If I was able to draw on this, just kind of in your mind, see that, what shape would it be if I continued those lines and where they crossed over? What kind of shape would it make eventually?
A triangle.
Yeah, it'd make a big triangle, wouldn't it? Okay. Now this trapezoid has 1 pair of parallel sides, and we already showed that was the top and the bottom. Can you identify which 2 sides are parallel? Oh, we just did it. Now, do trapezoids have, whoever made this should be TWO2. Oh, do trapezoids have to have sides that are congruent or the same length? Think about that. Does a trapezoid have to have sides that are the same length? What do y'all think? Somebody got a guess, yes or no?
No.
No, it doesn't have to. Because if you look at this one's a lot longer than this one up here. These on this trapezoid are probably the same length, but a trapezoid doesn't have to look just like this. It could look a little bit different. Parallelograms. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral that has 2 pair of parallel sides. Notice you got the word parallel in it. So it has to have parallel lines because the name of it goes with that. So we have this one right here, top and bottom, they're parallel. They would never cross. And the right and the left would never cross. A lot of times I think of a parallelogram. Think of like if you've got a box and when you had it and it was a brand new box and it was sitting on a table, it would look like a rectangle. But what if somebody put something heavy on it, kind of squished it down? Does this kind of look like what would happen to the box if something heavy was on it and it got kind of squished? That's what I think of parallelograms. Now this parallelogram has two pairs of parallel sides. We talked about top and bottom are parallel, left and right are parallel. Can you draw a parallelogram that looks different than this one? And I give you an idea of one when I told you about the box.
What did you say again?
Can you think of a parallelogram? Could you draw a parallelogram that looks different from this one? And when I told you the story about the box and getting squished, I give you an idea of another shape that could be a parallelogram. Just think, if this was a squished box, what shape was it before it got squished? If it was a brand new box and had nothing put on it that was heavy to cause it to get squished down, what shape was it to begin with?
Kind of like a square.
Well, it would have been more like a rectangle. You see how the top and the bottom are a little bit longer than the left and the right? Yeah, so it would have been a rectangle. So a rectangle can be a parallelogram, but also you did mention a square. A square can also be a parallelogram. Here we go with that square. A square can be everything. I think square is a little tricky. He could be a square, he could be a rectangle, it could be a rhombus, it can be a parallelogram, and now, yeah, that's all of them that we said, isn't it? It couldn't be a trapezoid. So far, a square can also be considered every one of these shapes so far, except for the trapezoid. So squares, a special kind of shape that we found so far. So here we are, quadrilaterals. With your newly found knowledge, you will be able to identify quadrilaterals everywhere. Try it on these. All right. Y'all call out, what's the name of this purple one I'm showing right here?
Square. Triangle.
Rectangle.
We're looking at quadrilaterals. So it has to be something that's four-sided. Think about if you look at this, what shape would you say it is?
Rectangle.
It's a rectangle, but you could also say it's remember what a rectangle could be?
A square.
No, not a square. A square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle cannot be a square.
A kite.
Where's his cup?
We didn't mention kites in here.
A parallelogram.
It could be a parallelogram. Mm-hmm. Can it be a rhombus?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could it be a trapezoid?
No.
No, it couldn't be a trapezoid. Okay. All right. What do you call this green one right here? What's a good name for this one? It's got two sets of parallel lines.
Parallelogram.
Parallelogram. There we go. Okay, what about this red one down here?
A rhombus.
A rhombus. And somebody did mention we could call it, sometimes we might see it on the test, a
Kite.
But on this thing, we're just focusing in on it being a parallelogram. Okay. What about this orange one right here?
Trapezoid.
Trapezoid. And that's all we could call it right there, a trapezoid or a quadrilateral. All these are quadrilaterals. Now here we go. First look at this. What would you say this blue one is right here?
Square.
Square. Okay, but we've talked about square can be called all these other things. So what else could we call it?
A parallelogram.
It could be a parallelogram. So we got square, parallelogram.
I don't see your mouse.
It's right here at this blue one. It's where I'm not moving it. So it's the blue shape.
A rhombus.
A rhombus. There we go.
A rectangle.
It's a special rectangle.
Mm,
We get them all. Square, rectangle, rhombus, parallelogram. I think that's all of them. Okay. Now this down here, this teal blue one, what would we call it? Can it be a square? Let's rule them all out. Square. Can it be square? Just yes or no. Is this a square?
mm,
Yes.
Look at this top side. Look at it compared
No.
to the square.
No.
No, we can't say it's a square. Is it a rectangle?
No.
No.
Oh, is it a trapezoid? Does it look like this one?
No.
Is it a parallelogram? Does it look like this one? No.
No.
Is it a rhombus? Does it look like this one?
No.
No. And we can say, oh, well, it's got parallel lines. It's got this and this left and right. But that top, if I kept on going with the top and kept on going with the bottom, would they eventually cross over?
Yes.
Yes. So I can't say it has two sets of parallel lines. So it's just plain old quadrilateral. Okay. All right. I think that's the end of that. Now, I'm going to go back and share something real quick. So, can you, now remember when I'm sharing stuff, I can't see you. I'll need you to answer me. Can you see the lines on this card?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So are these lines, all these lines parallel lines?
Yes.
Yeah, because they never cross over each other. So let me get another piece of paper here. Wish this is kind of hard for you to see, but can you kind of see where this white paper's on top of that one? I need to get a colored piece of paper so you can see it. Hold on. I don't see any in here right offhand. I'll use this right here. Okay, now you can see it. So like this is a corner of a piece of paper right here. If I traced over this, what kind of angle would you call this angle right there? Everybody's about said it. I'm gonna turn it upside up like this. What kind of angle would this one be? Remember I said we need to learn those names of those angles. If it was like the corner of a piece of paper, what would be the name of that angle?
A right angle?
It would be called a right angle. Okay, now I'm going to do this right here to make something else real quick. I want you to see how those three angles look to a right angle. Of course, a right angle would look just like a right angle. I'll be right back.
Miss Natalie,
Yes.
I gotta leave for another meeting for my speech.
Okay, that's fine. You just watch the recording of this after where you missed it, okay?
Okay, bye.
All right, so this is all right angles. But what if I have a shape? I'm actually going to put a shape inside of there. And what if I was to trace around this angle that I've got right here inside of this right angle? Oops, if I could trace it right. And I'm going to look at that angle right there. What would be the name of that one where it's, oh, it's so small and cute, smaller than a right angle? It is a what kind of angle? It's a little,
Acute.
acute angle. Look at that little acute angle in there. Now I've moved away from my computer. Can y'all still hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
This I have to move. I have to kind of move things around. Now, let me get another one, another shape. Let me put it, line this side across the bottom of that one, and I'm going to trace it. With this. Now look at this angle. It's bigger and goes wider than that right angle. Can anybody remember the angle that goes, it's bigger than a right angle?
A wider angle.
No. It is a wider angle, but what was the name of it?
Um,
Obtuse.
obtuse.
Yep. We have to know this for the test. We have to know what an obtuse angle is, an acute angle, and a right angle. Right angles with your regular voice because it's like the corner of a piece of paper. An acute angle is a little acute angle that's smaller than what the corner of a piece of paper is. And an obtuse, use that in a deep voice, obtuse angle goes wider than what that corner of a piece of paper is. Okay, we're going to be doing a lot of practice with this, but you'll need to know this because guess what? When you get upper grades, you're going to learn how to tell how many degrees each one of them is and use a thing called a protractor. So you need to know the names of acute, obtuse, and a right angle for later on. So that's why we're looking at that. So I am going to